Welcome to Orthodontic Smiles, the podcast designed for all dentists and their staffs that practice orthodontics. Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Ed Gonzalez. The sponsor of our show today is the American Orthodontic Society. This is Orthodontic Smiles. For this broadcast, we're honored to have Dr. Michael Pincus. We hope you enjoy Orthodontic Smiles. Through our interviews and segments, we will innovate, educate, and inspire you and your staff. Have you ever wondered what your career and your life will look like in 5, 10, or even 20 years? Have you ever asked yourself why your career has taken a certain path? Would you like to have more control of your future, or perhaps more understanding of your past? Well, our next guest wrote a beautiful book called The 7 Stages of a Dental Practice Life Cycle. In that, he spells out real-life scenarios that we all go through from his base of 35 years of practicing dentistry. This is our next guest, Dr. Michael A. Pincus. Michael grew up in Tampa, Florida, and went to high school at a high school that's only a couple of blocks from my present office. Then went to University of Florida and got a psychology degree, and then went off to dental school at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center and graduated in 1982. Mike has practiced in Dallas, Texas for 35 years. He's been very, very successful and is now in practice with his son. A few years back, he bought 5 dental practices and sold 2 of them, and currently owns and operates a DSO named Park Haven Dental Care. Mike's an amazing guy. He is a member of the AGD, member of the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry, American Academy of Sleep Medicine, but more importantly, for tonight's discussion, he's the American Academy of Small Business Consultants. He has more tricks in practice management than anyone I've ever talked to. So let's get with it and interview Dr. Michael Pincus. Michael Pincus, you're my good friend, entrepreneur, dentist, family man, unbelievable kind of guy. I'm so happy we've met. We've been friends for 3.5 years now, and I totally enjoy our time talking about everything in the world, life, dentistry, and just anything we want to talk about. So thank you for coming on the program. I really, really appreciate it.
Ed, I always look forward to visiting with you, and I value our times on Friday afternoons.
That's great. And I do. We've spoken every Friday for 3.5 years on Friday afternoons, and it's the wonderful thing I look forward to.
Me too.
Well, you know, you've really excelled in your life. You've really turned into some kind of entrepreneur dentist, and I think we want to search and find out, how did you end up being such a success, and how this has not stopped with you. You're just at the beginning of the big success of your DSO named Park Haven Dental Care. Tell us all about it.
Ed, when I was a young kid, when I got out of dental school at 26 years old, I didn't have a master plan. I saw other dentists that I knew, and I saw the kind of lives that they lived, and I thought that was great. I wanted to be a dentist since I was a young kid. When I went to the orthodontist, I got braces. I thought it was an easy way to make a living, and it turned out it's really not. But I didn't really have a master plan. I wanted to raise my children in a nice way. But as my career developed in the past that I just meandered through, after about 20 years of this, I figured that there was a rhyme or reason to it, and I started learning from the things that I had wandered into. And so my son went to dental school. I met a lot of his friends in dental school, his classmates, and they had a lot of questions for me as a practicing dentist. And I took time to really think about it, and I wrote a book. called The 7 Stages of a Dental Practice Life Cycle. And after that, I have certain things that we live by. And what I would tell you that we could talk about today is although I grew into this, I didn't really have a plan. I do have a plan now. And I will tell you that I could help anybody that's listening get from point A to point B a lot faster than I did. And I enjoy that.
I've read your book, and it's a fantastic little book. I mean, it's not a lot of pages, but it's called The 7 Stages of Dental Practice Life Cycle, and it goes from day one of deciding to be a dentist all the way through to the day you decide to retire. And it is, I'm kind of leafing through it right now, but it is actually just a step-by-step of exactly what you need to do. If you're going to be starting to practice, I mean, Dr. Pincus is giving you an actual checklist of exactly all the things that you need to prepare for before you start that practice. I mean, go buy life insurance. Do you have an existing policy? Obtain a new policy. Obtain insurance policy. Collateral assignment forms. Personal disability policy. Monthly benefits. I mean, it's step by step by step of exactly what you need when you're starting a business. God, I wish I had had that. Putting this all together took me 2 or 3 years to finally find out that somebody needed to help me. And you've done it for everyone. It's amazing. And then I'm kind of looking at the back here on the exit strategy, and I'm kind of looking at the steps I need for an exit strategy as far as the number of years that I've been practicing, Mike. But you're just at the beginning of all of this. I mean, you're just an entrepreneur. Unbelievable.
Ed, when you exit is when people won't need dentists anymore.
You're right.
That'll be the day when you exit.
I want to be the Bill Wyatt, the next Bill Wyatt. I mean, he practiced till he was 92 years old, and still has an interest in dentistry. Unbelievable.
Absolutely. You know, and you listed off some technical things that you need to do to get into a practice, to get out of a practice, and there are lists for that. But I think more importantly, it's the reasons why you do it and the strategies that you take, and why you take these strategies is how you get is how you become successful. And so that's what I really like to focus on.
Well, let's do that. Go ahead and give us your wisdom.
There's 3 credos that I really try to follow. 1, great ideas are easy. Doing them are hard. There's so many times you'll think of something, I think this would be great. And then once you get into it, it doesn't seem to turn out as well as what you like. I think it would be great to go to dental school. Okay, good. Then when you find out what it takes to be a dentist, maybe it wasn't such a great idea. But great ideas are easy. Doing them are hard. If they were easy, if it was easy to be successful, everybody would do it. Number 2, I like to work backwards from the goals that I've got. So I'll find something that I really want, and then you'll work backwards. How do you get there? So I want to donate money to the church or donate money to the University of Florida. All right, so then I'm going to write down specifically how much money I want to give, and then I'm going to write down how I'm going to get it, and then I'm going to write down what do I need to do to get that. I'm going to write down time frames. If you don't follow backwards like that, well, then you go back to step 1 where you had a great idea. So if you don't work backwards from your great idea, you're never going to get anywhere. If you don't know where you're going, you'll get nowhere fast.
Well, that's something that I have followed over the years. I always jot down things that I want to achieve. And I can just go back in my mind all the things that I wanted to achieve. There was one thing I remember. I worked in the 80s to try to bring a community college to my community, and the only way that I could figure I could have an influence was to get on the board of trustees, and I never could get there. And I wrote down one day, get on the board of trustees. And then I said, what have I got to do that? So I started writing down things. Call this guy, call that guy, call the next guy. Write this letter, do this, do that. It took me 7 years, but finally I got appointed by the governor to the Board of Trustees for our community. Once that happened, we had a community college in our community. So
you're a perfect example of what I'm saying. Your goal wasn't to be on the Board of Trustees. Your goal was to get the community college.
Exactly.
Well, that's a noble goal. And then you work backward. You did whatever you had to do to get there until your goal came together. Well, I already know you know how to do this, Ed, because you're so successful, but this is exactly what you need to do. And it wouldn't have been a good goal to say, I want to be on the Board of Trustees.
Right.
Because what do you want to be on the Board of Trustees for? It's not a noble endeavor. It may be noble that you're serving the Board of Trustees, but maybe you have a reason why. If you just want to be on the Board of Trustees, that's great. If you just want to be rich, that's not a real noble endeavor. So you had a noble endeavor, then you worked backwards from that. You were working backwards before you even knew me.
Exactly.
That's why I like you.
No, it isn't. I didn't have your knowledge and wisdom at that point, but now I do, and I will continue to write down things.
You know what? David Jackson taught me that. David Jackson taught me to write everything down. He would tell me, we would meet in October, and he'd say, what do you want to do for the next year? Write it down. It would be little things. It could be little things with my wife. And by the way, these things don't work just for your dental practice. These things work for life. Write down any kind of goal. You want to lose weight. Well, don't just say, I want to lose weight. Say, I'm going to lose weight. I want to lose weight so I can be healthy. That's the noble thing. It's not noble to just say, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight so I could be more healthy. So I'll be able to be with my family more, spend more quality time. And then you got to write down, well, how you're going to do it. Well, I'm going to go on this diet or that diet. I'm going to go to the trainer. I'm going to work out. Then write down timelines. Then you got to stay with it. But if you don't write them down, chances of being successful are not really great.
I agree.
And as I go and look at other practices that we buy or do things for our business, when I'm around dentists that don't follow these rules, they're not very successful. But the successful ones are. The successful ones, they all do the same thing. I didn't make this up.
Yeah, but you've lived that life. I mean, you obviously have been very successful yourself and have done things using that motto. I mean, I find that people that are successful. I had an associate at one time. What a wonderful woman she was. She worked for me for 15 years, and if I hadn't sold my practice, she'd still be there with me. But every day she had a scratch pad that she would write, oh my God, 15, 20 little items on it. And she was a mother of 2 kids. She was a great dentist. She kind of handled everything for her husband, who was a cardiac anesthesiologist. I mean, so her pot was full. And the only way that she could get through that pot every day was to write down all the things she had to do. Go pick up the laundry, go get the milk, go to the store, go buy socks for her son. I mean, every solitary little thing she wrote down. And you know what? By the end of the day, she had it all done. It's amazing. I've always respected her for that. But she was one of those people that lived the same kind of motto that you're talking about.
Ed, you're a pilot. Do you look at a checklist before you take off?
Absolutely. Never fails.
You would never not do it, would you?
I would never not do it. That is number one rule.
Why would you start a business or run a business or start any endeavor that you didn't go through your checklist? And that's what writing down things is.
It is a checklist. You're right. You're right.
So I do it all the time.
And you know when I started this podcast, I had no idea what a podcast was. I had to go listen to some podcasts to find out what podcasts were really all about. So I wrote down on the top of a piece of paper, podcast, and I had to learn every solitary thing about a podcast to be able to put a quality podcast out there for the American Orthodontic Society. And that's exactly what I have done. And I just followed all of the steps. You know, what do you have to do? What kind of equipment do you need? What kind of questions to ask? How do you put it on a server? How do you get iTunes to accept it? I mean, it is amazing the number of things that I learned. I think I was telling you the last Friday we talked, I said, learning to be an instrument pilot was probably harder than going to dental school or pediatric dentistry, but learning to do this podcast was even more hard than going to instrument training for my aviation endeavors. But so anyway, it's a great way to do things, and boy, I would encourage all of the listeners out there to do the same thing. That's one of the best practice management tools that I think anyone can do is set a goal and go for it.
You know, another one that I always live by is if you can't change the people, you must change the people. And it doesn't mean something's bad about the person you got to change. But if your visions aren't aligning properly, somebody's got to go. And usually the person that, you're going to have to make that decision. But it would be the best decision you make for yourself and the other person.
Well, you're talking about somebody that is not compatible with you to fire them from your practice. Is that what you mean?
In your practice, in your life, in anything that you're going to do, if you're not going in the same direction, and if you can't make them go that way, you're doing everybody a favor by going in a different direction. So sometimes if I have to discontinue somebody working for me, it's the best thing I'm doing for that person. And it's really funny, Ed, in 35 years, how many of those people have come back to me as patients? Lots of them. Lots of people that I fired bring their kids and their family, and they hug and kiss me when they come in, and it's really the funniest thing. I don't do it as a personal thing. It's just, if we're not going in the same direction, it's the best thing to do.
They know it. From experience of the people that I've ever had to let go from my practice, they knew that they were going to get relieved of their duties before I even talked to them, because they weren't happy. They weren't in sync with me and the practice and where we were going. So they had that feeling inside of their gut, and sure enough, that one day comes, and I always fire people on Friday afternoons at 5 o'clock, so that you can get the keys and they leave. But anyway, that's the way that they found out about it. But they were relieved at that point, and I suggested to them, look, you've been a great employee. You're just not the great employee for me. So I'll give you a great recommendation, because you are a good employee. You're just not the person for me.
There's certain cultures in business, and there's a book. It's either Good to Great or Great to Good, or that series of books that you know about, and they talk about visionary companies, and Nordstrom's or Johnson and Johnson or Southwest Airlines is a visionary company. People work for them for 9 months. If they make it past 9 months, they stay the rest of their career. If they get to 9 months and they don't like it, they leave at 9 months, because they're just not going to fit into that culture. And it doesn't mean something's wrong with that person, but it just means that they're adamant of the kind of culture that they have. And if you don't buy that culture and they can't make you buy into that culture, then they change you. Yeah. And I think that's a good thing.
Well, you've tell me a little bit about where you have strayed into this new world of dentistry. It's something that I'm a little bit foreign to, but you've educated me a little bit. But tell our listeners what you are doing now.
20 years ago, I had a successful dental practice, and these groups or chains tried to buy me. And so they came to me and they made an offer that I was interested in, but it wasn't quite where I saw myself at 40 years old. And I didn't need to do it. I was happy with what I was doing. But I thought to myself, if it's so smart for these guys, and some of the groups that had dentists involved that I had known and I really respected, I said, if it's so smart for them to buy me out, why don't I start buying smaller practices and grow them up? And that's exactly what I did. And back then I had a niche. I would look for rural practices, RURAL, for those of y'all not from Texas. But I would look for those country practices because they had low overhead. And my main practice was in a suburb of Dallas, Plano, in a just a regular suburban type area, an urban type place. And it worked out really well because there was no competition. And I grew a practice up in the country. And then I started taking on associates to help me get it, and in order to help me work it, and then in order for me to feed these associates that I really like, I wanted to grow the business more, and I was able to keep growing the business. But that taught me a lesson that I didn't know, that if you're going to really grow, you got to know that you can't do it yourself, and you got to get other people involved. And to get other people involved, you got to start getting good at systems. And I started trying to learn more about running systems, of running not only dental practices, but running businesses. And I got more involved at that, and you get more staff. And I bought another practice. And I sold one practice, and I bought another practice. And I had a partner. I had David Jackson as a partner. That's where I met you. And that's how it grew. I just, out of necessity, I started having, as my practice grew, I not only was doing dentistry myself, but I was starting to run a business. We had 2 or 3 different practices at a time, and I started running a business. That's why I started learning about it. And about that time, my son went to dental school, and I'm like, God, I got to really learn, because I want to tell him, because I saw that the future was not going to be the individual practice anymore, and I wasn't going to fight it. So many people fight what's going on. I don't make the rules, Ed. I just play by the rules. So you can fight it, but corporate dentistry is here to stay. It's probably 20% of the practices right now today in 2018 are corporately owned, and it'll be more in the future. And the delivery of dentistry is going to change in the future. And if we don't adapt to that, we're not going to be equipped to compete.
I think some of the latest research has shown that in the next 10 years, only 10 years, there will only be 5% of dentists who are solo practitioners or dental partnerships, which is telling me that that DSO model is probably working very well, and I think you're probably at the beginning of it.
So if you're a young student coming out of dental school, what do you think your opportunities are?
Well, long term, probably the DSO model.
Well, this would be how I would see it if I was talking to a young dentist like me. Now, one, the group practice, the corporate practice, the dental service organization is the shell or the form of the business that runs these things. Now, this is the model, but now you got to work backwards as a young dentist. Where do you want to be? What do you need? And so I would ask anybody, what's your goal? Now that you've already decided that you're going to be a dentist, where do you see your own future going? And it would ask a couple of questions. How much money do you think you need to live on to be happy? And I'd be specific. If I'm married, I sit down with my wife. Where do we want to live? What kind of schools do we want to send our kids to? What sort of charitable donations do we want to do? Do I want a boat? Do I want to join a country club? Do I like to golf? I would write all these things down specifically. And then I'd work backwards from that. And so if you have a lot of student debt, maybe it's not an option for you to go buy your practice. But buying a practice for a young graduating dentist is not a great option anyway, because they got to compete with all the corporate DSOs, the practices like mine, which would be hard to compete. We're open from 7 to 7. A solo practitioner can't do what a dental practice does nowadays regularly. So then I'd start looking at certain skills that maybe I would need to offer to make me more marketable and to make more money for me.
You have a unique, and I'm going to throw this out because we're out on the American Orthodontic broadcast or American Orthodontic Society broadcast, but you have a unique concept of orthodontics within the future of dentistry.
Yeah, I do, and I fully believe it. And you should believe it too. I believe the orthodontic practice will be like the general practice of the future, and this is why. In the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, I'd seen a lot of adult patients in their 50s that never had orthodontic care. Their teeth had giant silver fillings that they had since they were kids, and they would come to me with a toothache where one of these old fillings would fail. And we would do a root canal and do a crown and fix their teeth. And they would come back to me 2 years later and they would say, Doc, You've really been great. You saved my life. I hate how my teeth look, and I'm too old for orthodontics. Could you please fix my teeth?" And I would put 12 laminates on their teeth. And that was the basis of my practice for a long time. And that's how I made a living for a long time. But I've got a 34-year-old son and a 30-year-old daughter, and they've had orthodontics, and they've had their wisdom teeth taken out, and they've had fluoridated water, and they have zero, if any, one or if any fillings in their mouth. And the patient, the dental patient of the future, won't need a lot of operative dental care. I'm sure everybody that's been practicing a little while that's listening to this now knows that that's the case. So what's the general dentist to do? Well, you got to start providing services that are different than operative or crown and bridge care. And some of the things that won't go away is children will always need their teeth straightened. They just will. They don't get born with straight teeth. They're always going to need their teeth straightened. People will always have to have their wisdom teeth taken out. And so that's a service that I think the general dentist will need to provide regularly, and not something that would go to a specialist. People will have snoring or occlusal disorders. And so these sorts of oral appliances will be something that will be doing a great service. So the day that all the dentist does, people are going to have gum disease, possibly. So different sorts of gum service, but it's all specialty services what I'm looking at. So if I'm a young dentist getting out of school, I learn how to do these services because it makes you marketable. Because I don't think the need for orthodontic care is going to go away.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And you said that children need orthodontics. Well, so do young adults and elderly, because things usually get worse. Deep bites get worse as you get older, and it does produce some major TMJ problems that they need to deal with.
Occlusion causes all the problems. I think occlusion causes most of the problems. I won't say all the problems. Occlusion causes a lot. So straight teeth is for your health. Now the question is like, who's going to provide that treatment? And if I'm a dentist getting out of dental school right now, I learn how to do orthodontics.
Exactly, and that's where the American Orthodontic Society comes in.
And not just Invisalign.
Right.
Invisalign is not a way to. Invisalign is a gateway drug to getting your teeth straightened, but it's not definitive care. And if you can't provide that, then if you're only providing Invisalign, I don't even think you're doing a service for your patients.
Right. Invisalign works to some degree, but there are going to be anybody that's done Invisalign for any period of time knows that there are cases that just need to be treated with braces and wires and at least a shorter period of time. So whenever I do Invisalign to any of my patients, I always make sure that in my back pocket they know that there is possibly the need to do some braces at the tail end of treatment just to finish that case the way it's supposed to be finished.
Right.
That's important. And I think most people that do a lot of Invisalign know that. And if they don't know it, or if they're doing a lot of it, they will end up looking for a way to finish these cases. And we've had some members of our organization who got totally involved with. And I hate to say Invisalign. I don't want to say Invisalign because there's a lot of companies out there that do this, but they do with the aligner method of doing orthodontics, and all of them have realized that there are some cases that just don't need to be treated that way.
Well, they don't, but it's if you're going to say you could do something, you need to be able to finish the deal. And learning how to do real orthodontics like y'all do, like what the AOS teaches, is a great tool. And the people should know is I do not provide orthodontic care myself. We have doctors that work with us that are orthodontic providers that work in our group, but I don't do it myself. But I've been around a lot of the meetings with the AOS, and they really have a great teaching program. I got involved with it with Dr. Jackson, but they really got a really great. It's really a great service that they're doing.
And you gave a wonderful course to the American Orthodontic Society on practice management, which was really remarkable. It was great. It was a great day to spend with you and listening to all the things that you do in your practices. What's interesting to me is that you're buying these offices, and you're having these dentists who are in their mid-50s, if not older, and they've been practicing a certain way all of their lives. And now all of a sudden you come in, you buy the practice, and you change them. How do you do that?
It's hard to change somebody that's been practicing a certain way. But, one of the things we do is we show them what we've done. And we bring them into our other offices to show how they work. And I have a resume of what we've done that's been successful. And they usually, when they're ready to sell, maybe they haven't been as successful as they like and they want a different way. So a lot of times I just tell them, listen, if we're going to do it, you got to do it my way. And that's how we do it. But it's hard to change somebody. We don't change the supplies they use. We don't change the kind of dentistry that they do. We have a simple formula. We change their hours. We teach them that in the old days you'd think, well, the patients will come when I'm ready. But no, the patients want to go to the dentist on Wednesday afternoon when you're golfing, so maybe golf another time. And patients want to go to the dentist on a Saturday because they don't want to take off work to get their teeth cleaned, especially with the new patient, Ed. New patients don't have a lot of dental needs, as we just said. A 25-year-old, a 30-year-old person has already had braces typically. They've already had their wisdom teeth out, and all they really want is to get their teeth cleaned. And that's the thought is it's kind of like getting your nails done or your hair done. Yeah. You don't take work to get your nails done or your hair done. And that's kind of hard to make people change that attitude, but I changed it readily, and when we did, the practices really started growing. The patients aren't here for us. We're here for the patients.
Yeah, it used to be that when I had a patient come in, the first appointment was just to do an evaluation, take x-rays, and maybe polish the teeth. And then I would sit down with the patient and do a consultation. Well, I still do that on the first visit, but I will always, if they do happen to have some fillings that need to be done, I will always do 1 or 2 fillings just to be able to get them into the stream of the practice and let them see what the experience is like. And that keeps them going to the next practice. To the next appointment. Yeah. And that keeps them coming is what I'm saying. If you give them the opportunity, I got 8 cavities and they go off to some other dentist, and the other dentist is obviously going to find less. They always do. Then they may not be likely to come back to your practice. So we always want to close the deal. The way you close the deal is do the dental work, even if it's a little bit of dental work. Let them realize how good a dentist you are, and then they'll be back for the next appointment.
You know what, Ed? I'm writing that one down. I like that. I'm going back to the offices. I'm going to tell them, because we don't always do same day dentistry like that. But I'm going to write that one down.
Yeah, but you can always find time to do one occlusal if they need it.
Yeah. You asked me, how do we get these older dentists that are doing it a certain way, how to change? And you know what I do? I have them work backwards. I ask them once again, what do you want? You want to consider going down the same path that you want, or do you want to change paths? And so they say, well, I want to change paths. And I go, why? Well, I'm not making the kind of money I want. I'm not working the amount of time I want. I don't see a future. I don't see an end game. Okay, whatever the reason is. Why do you need money? Well, they may need it for retirement. They may want to give it to their kids. They may want to take their grandchildren to Disney World. They may want to donate money. Okay, so once we've already determined what they want, then I say, well, if you don't want to go the same where you're going, this is how we go. And so you've already told me why you want to do what I'm telling you to do. You've got your own reasons. So a lot of times the motivation for people is not, you got to find what motivates yourself. I don't know what it is, but and I ask everybody that, what do you want? Where are you going? How can I help you get there? And this is what we do. Plus, if you want to be successful, do what successful people do.
That's a good one. That's a good one, and we're following you. And you're giving us some good advice. Let me ask you one really hard question, because there's a lot of members of our organization that are your age, my age, and older maybe. What is a good exit strategy for their offices?
Okay, so that's a great question. It's like in the book, The 7 Stages of a Dental Practice Life Cycle, you get to the mature stage, or you get to an expansion stage, or you get to the exit stage. Now, if you've already gotten to the mature stage, which in the last 10 years you haven't bought new equipment because you just don't feel like spending the money, you don't know how much longer you're going to go, or you haven't repainted, or you haven't updated your location, and you don't see any benefit in that, or you've quit going to continuing ed, you're finishing up the orthodontic cases that you're doing, well, then you really need to go to exit stage, because the mature stage is just dying, and you don't want to stay there and die. Now, it doesn't matter what age you are either, as long as you're stimulated. If you decide, I'm finished with this, sell the practice. If you still need money after you've sold the practice, go get a job. Do not keep the same practice that you've got. Because when you've got an old office with old equipment and old unmotivated staff, new patients do not want to go to you. You could talk yourself into it, but they do not. Because if you can't stand being in that place anymore, the patients can't stand being in that place. Sell immediately. However, if you're 50, 55, 60 years old and you find that you still want to stay viable, you still like it, you need to expand. Don't say, I'm 60, I can't spend money to paint or get new equipment. Go do it, because it'll stimulate you, and it'll stimulate the things you need to do. Now, you need to work backwards. Why do you want to do it at 60? If you still need money, you still like the income that you like, then that's great. If you still need it, then you're going to make an investment in owning it. If you're not willing to make this investment in expanding, hire an associate, expanded hours, doing the things to stay viable. If you keep doing the same things, you won't be viable. If you're only open from 9 to 4, 3.5 days a week, your patients will go somewhere else the other 2. Absolutely. You cannot do that. You can't run that business model anymore. You need to be in the world that we're in. The world that we're in is different than when we started. So if you're not ready for that commitment, sell the practice before the practice goes dead on its own. That's what I would do.
That's great advice. I tell you that what I did, and this was 10 years ago. You know, it wasn't a long time ago, but it was before corporate dentistry really got started. Was I came to the realization that I had put a tremendous amount of sweat equity into a huge 13-chair, 26 employee staff practice that was making a lot of money. And I realized that if I were to try to continue for the next 10 years in trying to manage that I would give out. There would just be no way for me to continue at that pace. So I started, actually at 60 years old, I started another practice in another part of town. And I always kind of considered that to be my retirement village. I always said, okay, let me sell this big, huge thing, get my sweat equity out of it, and then move over to my retirement village and live out the years that I want to practice dentistry there. And it worked out very well for me. I was very happy doing that. It was the right time for me to sell 5 years ago. And the little practice that I had does very well for me. I got a lot of money out of the practice that I sold, and it was the right thing to do. So that's just another strategy. I don't know that you could do that now. Now that DSOs are popular,
you can absolutely do it now. As a matter of fact, the DSOs will help you, because if you sold a practice like what you had, a corporation would have come and bought your old practice. They'll buy the practice that you have right now.
That's
you
true.
Let them run it. You work 3 days. They put another pedodontist in there with you. You do your ortho, whatever you want to do. You still get to practice on your own terms. So exactly. It would work. It would work great. I'd buy your practice in a heartbeat.
Well, thank you. I'll call you after this show is over and we can discuss it. Mike, you have been...
Average ways, But if you know what? This is why you're successful, Ed. I talk to you every Friday. I already know you. You changed before you had to.
Yeah.
So write that one down too. Don't wait till you have to change. Change before you have to. You got to read the tea leaves occasionally.
Yeah. And that's very true.
By the way, either, but you got to make a stand one way or the other. But if you're going to stay exactly as you are, I don't know why anybody would be foolish enough to think I'm 60 years old and I've been really successful for all this time, and I'm just going to continue doing what I'm doing.
Well, I wish all these young guys a tremendous amount of success. You and I have had a great run. You're continuing. I'm continuing. I don't think there's a day that I'm going to retire. I enjoy doing what I'm doing as long as I can do it, and no one taps me on the shoulder and says, Ed, I think maybe it's better you not do this anymore. But as long as I can do what I'm doing, I'm enjoying it, and I love every day that I go to work and try to help my patients out. I'm not working for myself anymore. It's funny. I know it sounds, pristine, but I'm not working for myself anymore. I can retire if I want to, but I'm working for my patients because I enjoy it. I know I can do a good job. They are benefited by it, and I think I have a few more years left in me.
Ed, you're successful because you're all your endeavors, all the things you work backwards for are noble. You're working for your patients. You're working for your staff that loves you. You're working for the AOS. You're not doing this podcast for yourself. You can talk to me anytime and for free. So you're doing all of these things for the good of dentistry. I mean, look at all the good that you do for dentistry. That your patients you don't get anything out of it. Your patients don't know that you're talking to me right now. So you do a lot of nice things, and that's why they're all successful.
Well, thank you, Mike, and I want to thank you for being on our podcast this week. It's I know it will air, and I promised all of our subscribers that we would be giving them some practice management tips. And I always had you in the back of my head because I knew you have so many practice management tips. It's ridiculous. And I'm going to continue to add you to our list of contributors to certain segments of practice management because you're so good at what you do. So I want to thank you, Mike.
Thank you. If you give out my email address, if somebody wants you, they can email me. I'll mail them a book.
Well, go ahead and do that. Give them your address.
Michael Pincus at yahoo.com. MichaelPincus at yahoo.com. If anybody wants to send me an email, question me, I'll send you the book. I'd love to talk to you about it.
That'd be great.
Because anybody could do it. If I could do it, anybody could do it.
I agree. And it's just making the determination that you're going to do it. That's it. And it's a great little book. Anybody that's listening, I tell you, just request that book from Michael. He's not asking for money for it, but it's a great book, and you're really going to enjoy it. So
I didn't say I wasn't asking for money, Ed. No, I'm just kidding.
I got it. I mean, you could charge $25 if you wanted to. It's worth it.
Right. No, I'm teasing. I'm happy to give it away.
That's great. So, and I thank you so much for being on the show. This is going to be one of the highlights of the American Orthodontic Society podcast called Orthodontic Smiles. Thank you very much, Dr. Michael Pincus. This is your host, Dr. Ed Gonzalez. I want to thank you for listening to Orthodontic Smiles today. If you enjoyed our broadcast, please click the subscribe button. We'll be in touch with you in the future about our further broadcasts. Thanks for listening.